Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow.
Welcome back to another episode of Lone Star College Football. We're joined with a guest today, Jonathan Davis over at Locked On Longhorns. How you doing today, man?
I'm blessed. You know, it's the Wednesday of Red River Week. You know,
Yes,
it's
sir.
a very exciting season for Texas thus far. 5-0, looking like one of the most complete teams in the country, and we got one of the most historical rivalries in sports this weekend. So feeling good. Hopefully, I still feel this good on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely, man. This rivalry is just a spectacular thing for college football. Seeing the stadium split down the middle, half side of home, half side away. It really is something remarkable.
So
Y'all make sure
I'm gonna
y'all.
ask you really quickly, though, right? I'm gonna
Yes,
ask you
sir.
really quickly because there's been some debate, right? People
Okay.
say, you know, I know I hear a lot of Texas and Oklahoma fans say it's the best spectacle in college football, but then you will hear some people say Ohio State, Michigan, Army, Navy, you know, the Iron Bowl, Auburn, Alabama. Where does it stack up to you amongst those great rivalry games?
You know, and I'm biased. I'll admit it, but yeah, I'm putting it at number one. I think the only
Okay.
rivalry game that could match with it is when we get the return of the Lone Star Showdown in 2024.
Okay. So
I
Texas has
think.
the two top
I
rivalry games
mean,
in the sport. Okay.
don't get me
Okay.
wrong. I'll watch Michigan Ohio State every year. You know,
Yeah.
there's not a year I'm gonna miss that. But Red River truly is something special. Y'all make sure y'all check out Locked On Longhorns, man. All the Locked On, really, they put out great content week after week. I go, whoever we're playing, if they've got a Locked On channel, I'm checking it out for all the intel on that team. It really is awesome for YouTube to have the series. And do they cover most teams, right?
Yeah,
Or just
most
most
college
major?
football teams. Well, I mean, there's 134 of them, so maybe I shouldn't say most, but pretty much the major ones. Power Five for sure. I think we're
Okay.
pretty well covered. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is awesome. And before we jump into the season, I do want to make another announcement. We are doing a giveaway. I have a signed Earl Campbell jersey. It comes with a certificate of authenticity. It has some stitching of his stats from the 1977 Heisman year. And all you have to do to be entered to win is subscribe to the channel. I just posted a video with Jason Watkins from Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. Like the video, leave a comment with your score prediction, and whoever gets it right or the closest wins the jersey. If we have a tie, we'll do a random generator, and that will be that. So, the season, Jonathan, where were you standing before this year? Was this a Big 12 or bust for you? I know some Texas fans, it's kind of back and forth of you have to win the Big 12, you just have to make the Big 12. Just be respectable. Don't lose to Kansas or Texas Tech. How do you think the season's going so far?
I've had to pivot, right? I've had to pivot through 5 weeks. I think going into the season, this was a Big 12 championship or bust type year for me, right? When I looked at the landscape, I said, there's no Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma team that's daunting, right? There's no, you know, TCU from last year who was beatable, you know, but Texas kind of wet the bed a little bit against them. But there's no premier contender to Texas this year in the Big 12. I said with the talent level, year 3 under Steve Sarkisian, we remember that pivot episode that he did on YouTube where he said, this looks like my team. It feels like my team. They're talking, they're practicing like my team. They got speed like my team. I said, there should be no reason why you don't go out there and win the Big 12 conference this year. But that was the main goal. I wasn't thinking college football playoff. I wasn't thinking national championship. I thought we would lose to Alabama. So I was just focused on the Big 12. And I said, when we get to the SEC, we'll up the ante a little bit. After 5 weeks, I've had to pivot my expectations. When you go out there on the road to Tuscaloosa and win that game in the fashion that you did, when you go out there, your first 2 Big 12 games, you win them 38-6 and 40-14. This looks like one of the most complete teams in the country and certainly looks like a team that can not only make it to the college football playoff, but might make some noise when they get there. So coming into the season, I was Big 12 championship or bust. Now I'm holding on each week, right? You know, praying in front of the TV, hoping they don't lose, because this certainly is a team that can make it to the playoffs and might win a few games when they get there.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like on our way ups, though, there's also been a down, all right? Because you beat Bama and we look great. I mean, just dominant. The trenches, we dominated. We held the ball at the last 7 minutes and 30-something seconds and only gained 34 yards. It was just, we're going to run it and y'all aren't going to stop us. We're going to move the chains. And then we come out a little flat against Wyoming, take it into the fourth quarter. So the expectations have been on a roller coaster, but definitely on the up and up right now. Not only a 38-6 and a 40-14 win, you got to look at both of those games and say, we still shot ourselves in the foot in each of those. We had 2 muff punts against Baylor. We could have beat them 50-something to 3. We had the interception before half by Quinn, trying to get the ball down the field for a field goal, 2 missed field goals against Kansas. Really, we should have beat both of those teams by quite a bit more, just showing that we can dominate. And it's exciting. You know, that battered fan syndrome that us Longhorn fans have to deal with is tough. And it's fun to win, that's for sure.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you. You know, it's great to be at a point now where we can critique Texas for winning, right, and say that they left a little bit of meat on the bone. And you know, I had a feeling they would come out a little flat against Wyoming. I was at the game last year. I was at both games actually, the Alabama game and the UTSA game immediately following it in DKR. And if you remember, we were down 17-7 to UTSA after losing to Bama. You know, they always say don't let Bama beat you twice, or, you know, don't let that Bama game affect you twice. It did last year, and it did against this year. They came out a little flat against Wyoming. Obviously, Quinn Ewers, you know, had a less than stellar performance, but I love the way they responded against 2 Power 5 opponents in Baylor and Kansas. You know, the 2 weeks following coming out with real, you know, complete team efforts, especially Quinn Ewers bouncing back from that dud against Wyoming with 2 back-to-back elite performances on tape.
For sure. Offensively, I want to ask you, what do you think is the most surprising? And I think I might know your answer. Would you say it's the development from Quinn or the running game? Which one did you expect more coming into the season?
I'm going to say the running game, or excuse me. I'm going to say I expected more of the development from Quinn, right? We knew that, you know, second year under Steve Sarkisian, there's a track record for that. Just a second year for quarterbacks in the system in college football, that they usually, you know, come out and are really good. We expected the offensive line to be better. We knew that he had crazy talent around him. Then you go add A.D. Mitchell, you bring back Xavier Worthy, JT, and then Jordan Whittington. So you expected fireworks from Quinn Ewers in this offense. But we thought that losing Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson would have an impact on this run game, right? Now, you knew that Jonathan Brooks, as a Texas fan, Jonathan Brooks and Cedric Baxter were really talented, and then, of course, the running backs behind them. But you didn't expect them to be Bijan or produce like Bijan, right? And then, you know, maybe I'm a little cynical, right? But I'm reading all the practice reports over the offseason. Offensive line is not really getting a push. The defensive line is winning the scrimmages, right? They're winning the practices. And based on what we've seen from the defensive line, that's not too surprising. Remember in the spring game, it didn't feel like we could get a good push up the middle and run the ball. Remember against Rice, it didn't feel like we could get a good push and run the ball. Then the last 3 weeks, Jonathan Brooks has turned into the best player in the country, damn near, and a legitimate Heisman contender. I think I've been talking the last 2 days on my show. We have to, the way that Texas has played, we have to consider Jonathan Brooks right now as at least a low-end Heisman contender. So I would say that's been the most surprising part thus far, especially the last 3 games, that they have produced one of the best rushing attacks without Bijan Robinson the last 3 weeks and literally look like one of the most complete offensive units in the country. I expected what Quinn Ewers is doing right now. Maybe it took a little bit longer to get here. I did not expect the run game and Jonathan Brooks to be dominant the way they have been the last 3 weeks, I should say.
Yeah, I agree. And you look at how this season kind of led up to, with all the talk around Steve Sarkisian as a head coach, he's never had a season with not having a rusher over 1,000 yards. And a lot of people thought this was going to be the year, because you just can't replace Bijan and really Roschon. They're both just such talented backs, and we're seeing it progress into the NFL with both of them. Jonathan Brooks didn't even get the start in week 1.
Cedric Baxter got the start. He wasn't even the starter. And you know, obviously, you know, knock on wood, I want to make sure that Cedric Baxter is good and he stays good. But it was kind of an injury that put Jonathan Brooks in this position. And, you know, he hasn't looked back. So
he took advantage.
For the Texas football team for sure.
He definitely took advantage of his shot. He's currently the number 3 running back in the nation as far as yards. And I just think it's going to be up and up from there for him. He's averaging 6.9 yards per carry. Jeez.
7.5 yards per touch. Like every time you put the ball in his hands, you're expecting 7.5 yards. I mean, it's ridiculous. He's been one of the best players in the country the last 3 weeks. And it was crazy. You talked about him being 3rd in rushing, averaging 6.9 yards a carry. If you go look back at the Rice game and Alabama game, I think he had 55 rushing yards in one of those games and 57 in one of those games. So it's really been the last 3 weeks where he has just blazed the trail and, like I said, turned into a legitimate Heisman contender.
Yeah, and we're going to talk here in a minute about how that's going to help us this week. But let's flip it to the passing game and talk about how that's opening up the floodgates for him to run the ball. You know, when you've got a quarterback like Quinn, he's talented. All he needs to do is set his feet and throw the ball. He's shown the last 2 weeks he's got some legs on him too. All right, he ain't no Vince Young, but he He can move a
Quince
little
Young.
bit too. Yeah, I saw that on Twitter.
Quince Young. That's what they're calling him now, man.
But when you have receivers like Worthy, Mitchell, JT Sanders, Jay Witt, the defense can't stack that box and just think you're not going to take the top off. They have to respect it. They have to back up. And the offensive line returning 5 starters. Do we have an update yet, Cole Hudson?
I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure on that one.
I know Sark said we're day-to-day on Sanders and Ryan Watts on the defense still.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect Cole Hudson to be playing this week.
Okay.
I would think
give him another bye week. And
yeah, I think DJ Campbell's going to be there at right guard.
And he's stepped up. He's played well.
Yeah.
I think he has gotten better in each game. So the offensive line is just pushing. Man, how are you seeing this receiver room shaking out? Mitchell's leading the way in touchdowns. Worthy's leading the way in receptions. Sanders is looking like the second best tight end in the country. Sark is doing his thing. What do you think about it?
Yeah, so I think when you came into the season, you knew that the passing game had the ability to be special. And I've said that, Texas fans, since Sark got here, have been waiting on that 2020 Alabama offense, right? People have said Xavier Worthy could be Devontae Smith. Quinn Ewers could be his own version of Mac Jones, right? So, when could he put forth that type of offense that just simply was unstoppable? I mean, they ran through everybody in 2020, and we felt like we had the pieces in all of the respective, skill talent rooms, right? In the receiver room, the tight end room, the running back room, we had those pieces. We felt like bringing back the offensive linemen that we had the foundation to have a really good run game. But I think the passing game, but coming into the season, I think there were 2 question marks. One, I think, was a little unwarranted. One was warranted. One question mark was about Quinn Ewers. That was warranted. Last year, he completed 58% of his passes. And outside of some performances against Washington, Oklahoma, and Alabama, for the most part, he didn't look like that player he looked like at South Lake Carroll. He didn't look like one of the highest graded recruits of all time. So coming into the season, you may have questioned, would we see that jump from Quinn Ewers? Thus far, it looks like we have. And then there were question marks about Steve Sarkisian, right? His ability to manage a game, sometimes his play calling getting unimaginative, right? Could he lead a dominant offense at the University of Texas? And I think he's answered those questions as well. So we knew that the skill talent would show up, but we had to see how Quinn Ewers would be able to get the ball to that skill talent and how Steve Sarkisian would put it all together through 5 weeks. It hasn't been perfect, but I think it's been ideal, and it's the biggest reason why Texas is 5-0.
Yeah, absolutely. And as great as the offense can be, the amount of talent we have, I think we'd be missing a huge part of this if we didn't talk about the defensive side of the ball, because they're lights out right now. We've played, obviously, Bama this year isn't the same Bama offense they've had in the past. Kansas without Daniels isn't quite as good. Now, I will say Jason Bean is a 6-year player. He's got plenty of experience. I've been seeing him get a lot of crap. Mind you, if he had won that game, he'd be getting all the praise in the world. But Jason Bean has put up really good numbers in some of the games that he's played in, so I don't want to discredit him. The defense is playing amazing. Jalen Ford, what's the stat now? 8 in the last 11 games that he's played in. He has a turnover in.
The ball man, yeah, he's special.
Johnny Barron is playing well. Tavondre Sweat might be the best interior defensive lineman in the country right now. Thompson's getting turnovers. What's the secret formula to this defense that's making it more cohesive? Because I kind of expected a little bit more of a drop off losing a leader like DeMarvion Overshone and I'm blanking on the defensive lineman that we lost. Keandre Coburn and was it Ojabo? Yeah. I was expecting a drop off.
Yeah, I think the biggest reason is continuity, right? When you have year 3 of Pete Kwiatkowski, up until this point, I think as far as coaches, we've only had to replace running back coach and wide receiver coach twice, right? So you have the same defensive coaches that you've had since literally the day one, right? Since 2021. And I think now in year 3 in that system, they're playing fast. They understand it. They understand what they're supposed to do, and they go out and execute it at a high level, right? In 2021, you could see that they didn't necessarily understand where they were supposed to be or what they were supposed to accomplish, and they played a little bit slow. Last year, it was better, but you still had those blow-up performances against Texas Tech and Oklahoma State. This year, they have fully mastered the game plan under Pete Kwiatkowski, and they're playing at a high level. And I think they've done such a good job of bringing in young talent and bringing in great talent in the transfer portal like Ryan Watts, Jalen Catalon, and Trill Carter to supplement what you already had from the Tom Herman era. But we've seen so much development. Byron Murphy, Barron Sorrell, Tavondre Sweat, Jalen Ford, Jaron Thompson, corners on the back end that were from the Tom Herman era that are playing the best football of their careers up until this point. So I would say continuity, right? Having the same defensive coaching staff for 3 years, that means a ton. The experience, right? Having those players for the Tom Herman era who are playing the best football of their career, and then bringing in the new talent via the recruiting classes. Malik Muhammad and Anthony Hill have been absolutely special as true freshmen through 5 games. And then going in the transfer portal, Jalen Catalon, Ryan Watts, and Trill Carter have all been plus players for you. That's why this defense has been one of the best units in college football this year. And I misspoke saying the offense is the biggest reason we're 5-0, because it's certainly the defense, right? And like you said, you expected that this defense may take a step back, but they've been one of the best units in college football this year. I said if Jalen Catalon can play 10-plus games, this defense could be borderline elite. I'm not even sure they've been borderline elite because of Jalen Catalon. They've just been elite, period. And like we said about the offense, I think this defense can get even better as the season goes along. But certainly they have a tough test this weekend against Dylan Gabriel and the Oklahoma Sooners.
Yeah, what I really want to see this week is getting the quarterback on the ground a couple times. I'm a little, I don't want to say disappointed, because he's making plays in other assets of the game. I really thought Barron Sorrell would have a few more sacks so far in the season. He seemed to make, I think he had 5.5 last year. He's got 1 so far in the season. Anthony Hill had 2 against Bama. We haven't seen any more out of him. Right now, it's Byron Murphy and Ethan Burke and Anthony Hill leading the team in sacks, and that's a great place to be. Kind of want to see them get the quarterback on the ground a few more times this week.
Yeah, Barron Sorrell, you definitely, that's going to be the key to stopping what's been for the most part a high-powered Oklahoma offense. I think when we look at defensive alignment, a lot of times, especially at the edge position, we look at sacks, right? And I don't have the advanced numbers in front of me, but I think based on the performances we put together, that Barron Sorrell's been better than those numbers would show, right? Are we looking at pass rush win rate? How much is he winning and not getting to the quarterback? How much is he putting pressure on the quarterback and not getting a sack, right? So as a Cowboys fan, I watch Michael Parsons every week, and he's dominant whether he gets the sack or not, right? So I think, I'm not looking at the advanced numbers, but I think Barron Sorrell has been a little bit better than the box score would tell us through 5 weeks.
Absolutely. He is causing disruption in other ways, and it's kind of a hidden stat that you don't always get the praise for, but I guarantee you the defensive backs, they appreciate it.
And then the 1 sack he had was huge, because that was when Wyoming was down 10-7, and they looked like they could score a touchdown to go up, and then he got the sack to make them force that field goal, and then they never scored again. So talk about impact. Barron Sorrell's been really good for this Texas football team.
Absolutely. Well, hey, let's jump into this Red River game. Let's break it down a little bit. We've got, what is this, the 120th meeting of these two teams, I think?
Something like that. But what's crazy is I just saw a stat, and it's only like the 4th or 5th time that both teams have been 5-0 going into the game.
The third. I think it's the third.
Only
since 1944 or something like that. Yeah.
I would have got that so wrong if I was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or something. That's crazy. Like, only the 3rd time?
Yeah, if that's the all-state trivia question, I would have got it wrong for sure.
Exactly.
For sure. And it's a test. You see it in Texas and Oklahoma, and really you could throw A&M into that situation as well. As far as like recruiting, there's only been a handful of times in which all 3 of those have been in the top 10 in recruiting in the same year. Because of location, it's hard for all 3 of these programs to maintain excellence at the same time. And now we know Lil Bro don't really maintain excellence ever. But for
even
Texas
when they do recruit at a high level, yeah, exactly.
Right. Texas and Oklahoma, they're competing for a lot of the same guys, so it is hard for them both to be at the top. Looking at this game, like I said, I talked to Jason, made a video with him yesterday. He says that they're running a lot of 3-3-5 defense, which I think will bode well for them in the passing defense. But I do think that's going to open up that run game for us enough to where we might be able to pull them out of that kind of early. I don't see 3 down linemen. I don't see that being enough to block us and stop Jonathan Brooks from being able to just run it wherever he wants to.
Yeah. So, that 3-3-5 has been something that's given Sark trouble. And obviously we know, Brent Venables' pedigree, as a defensive coordinator. So I would expect him to come in with some looks that may give Quinn and Sark some trouble. And we saw last year against Iowa State, a game that, probably they should have lost if Xavier Hutchinson doesn't drop that wide open pass. And in the game they did lose to TCU, neither one of those performances were exceptionally great on the offensive side of the ball. I think you scored maybe 24 combined offensive points in those games, maybe 27, something like that. So Sark hasn't been great against the 3-3-5. And I think what's really going to be key is the health of JT Sanders. Now, we probably won't know until Saturday, but I just think that gives you so much flexibility, especially against, a tough defense like that, right? Because you can come out in that 12 personnel and really have the pieces up front you need to be dominant in the run game, right? Or really kind of put the numbers in your favor. But we know Steve Sarkisian can do so much as far as leaking JT Sanders out in the pass game as well. And that's something that gave Oklahoma trouble last year, right? So I think that Texas will be able to run the ball this week. I think that they can win the matchup in the trenches up front. And certainly, with Jonathan Brooks' running style, his balance, get him the opportunity to make some big plays. But I think the biggest thing in terms of the run game is, will you have JT Sanders to rely on Saturday, and how effective will your 12 personnel packages be? Because Gunnar Helm is certainly capable. He can make some catches. Gunnar Helm is certainly capable. He can go out there and block, but he's not JT Sanders. And having them both together on the offensive side of the ball can cause so much confusion for the defense that I think it would be a huge loss advantage Oklahoma if JT Sanders can't play on Saturday in the run game and maybe the pass game if we're talking about their defense.
Right. And I want to say Sark mentioned something about Malik Ogbo going out there and running tight end for the blocking scheme, didn't he?
Yeah, so earlier in the season, I think it was the Rice game. Not sure how much they did it in the Bama game. But remember last year how Andre Kirich was our extra tight end? They ran some of that in the Rice game with Malik Ogbo. So that certainly could be something that they go to in this game, especially if you feel like you can't get a push. But you always have to remember, if you're bringing an offensive lineman on the field, you're taking a skill position off the field. So how explosive can you be in those packages?
And they also more than likely know you're running the ball, so we'll see how that works.
Right, yeah, if you got Malik Ogbo and tight end, you're probably running the ball.
I like my odds of goal line Malik Ogbo and Byron Murphy leading the way for Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah, I said
Byron Murphy got hands too.
He might be the best fullback on the team for sure. So I really like that. I want to ask you, what I mean, how do you feel about this Oklahoma offense against the Texas defense, right? Because this is the Oklahoma offense that's put up some points. I think 73 against Arkansas State. I think they scored 50 last week against Iowa State. Dylan Gabriel has certainly looked really comfortable. And that offense under Jeff Lebby in year 2 has been moving a lot better than we saw last year. So how do you expect them to fare against the Texas defense this weekend?
Yeah, man, I think their offense is putting up good numbers, but when you're not playing anything of real statistical value, the teams they're playing just aren't that good. And I don't want to take too much away from this offense, because it is an Oklahoma offense. So you do expect there to be explosive plays, but at the same time, Arkansas State, where nobody's looking at any team that they've played, saying Bama is our toughest game, Kansas is our second toughest. I don't think anybody on their schedule thus far is better than Kansas. Even Baylor, the way they played Saturday in the second half, if they played a full game of that, I don't know as if anybody on their schedule is better than Baylor if Baylor plays at their best. So this is definitely going to be the toughest offense that Oklahoma has seen. And their defense is playing well. They've got a linebacker. Let me pull up his name. He is leading. I think he's leading the country in tackles right now. Stutzman.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah, Stutzman. Yeah.
I mean, he's all over. He's got 2 sacks. He's got an interception. 49 total tackles already through 5 games. So it's going to be a matchup for sure. I don't know, man. I think our offense is going to be able to eat. I think our defense is going to be able to eat, because they're not running the ball well at all. Their leading rusher has 199 yards. Now, their backup has 193, but they're not running the ball. And against some of these teams they've played, you would say, hey, if your offensive line can bully, you would kind of expect them to bully a little bit. And I just don't think we've seen that as much.
Right. So I guess what I want to ask you now is, before we get out of here, right? I would ask you what I usually do on my show, who wins, who covers, but I already know how you're feeling right based on your. So I know you think that Texas is going to win and probably cover. I'll go ahead and ask you that. Do you think Texas covers at this point?
I do. My current score prediction is Texas 38, Oklahoma 27.
All right. At this point, it may change, but I do think Texas wins and Texas covers. But for that to happen, what are the biggest matchups in this game that need to go Texas's way? It could be individual player or unit matchups. And then I'll give you mine.
Well, because of my score having 38, I do believe we have to kick at least one field goal. So we're going to need Bert Auburn to hit if we call his name more than once, we need him to go out there and be consistent. This isn't the game to mess that up. I would say the biggest key matchup, just based on this season and how we've won the last 3 weeks, I do think it's going to be our offensive line versus their defensive line in the run game. I think if we can dominate the trenches in the run game, I think we get out with a pretty good win.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to say our matchup is going to be our offensive line and Jonathan Brooks and our running back, Cedric Baxter. Hopefully this is his first big game, right? Yeah. Against their front seven. I think that's really going to, have a big part in determining who wins this game, because if we can dominate their front seven, then there's no way they can cover all of our receivers on the outside, whether JT Sanders plays or not, right? I still think we have too much talent against them. And then in terms of the defense, right, so much has been made about how we may be susceptible to the big play, right? And I'm not sure if Dylan Gabriel, can get it there or whatever. I'm not sure if their receivers can get past us, but so much has been made about the big play, right? We gave up, the deep pass in the Alabama game, the long run in the what was that though? The Wyoming game after, just some big plays, right? And people feel like our safeties may be a little susceptible. So I'm going to say if we do get aggressive, if we blitz and we have our corners or our safeties on an island, can they hold up in one-on-one coverage against Dylan Gabriel in this passing offense, especially with that tempo, right? And I want to see too, because, and this is just a point I'm going to bring up now, we've done such a good job of rotating our players, right? It feels like every week, especially on the defensive end, we bring in 20 different players that don't just play snaps, they make an impact, right? They show up in the box score in the stat sheet. And when you go to that second unit, they still show up and show out. When you go to the true freshmen, they still show up and show out. Does that change this week with that Oklahoma tempo, right? Does that Oklahoma tempo affect the depth a little bit, right? If they're playing more snaps and they're on the field a little bit more, are they still as productive? Are they still as fresh? So that's something I want to see. Can our depth kind of cancel out that Oklahoma tempo, or will that tempo cancel out our depth? I think that's going to be a huge thing this weekend.
Something has to give.
Right. Something has to give. There you go. They say throw out the spread, throw out the records, throw out what happened the previous weeks. One of the best rivalries in sports, one of the most historical rivalries in sports. Cannot wait till Saturday. And I'm so grateful it's at 11 a.m. because the anxiety of waiting all day for the Bama game killed me, right? At least we can wake up, drink a few beers, and we'll be ready to watch the game on Saturday.
There you go. Sounds like a plan. Well, hey, man, it's 10:25. OU still sucks. I appreciate you coming on the show.
No problem.
Let the people know where they can find you on all the socials.
All the socials. You can find me at Jonzo Ball, like Lonzo Ball. That's the personal Twitter. You can find me at Locked On Horns. That's my Longhorn Twitter. And, of course, you can find me at Locked On Longhorns on YouTube and audio, wherever you get your podcasts. This video may end up on my feed as well. I know that you have an up-and-coming Texas YouTube channel. I want to support that as much as I can. So please let my Locked On Longhorns listeners, let them know where they can find your work as well.
Yeah, man, we're on YouTube, Lone Star _ I don't know if there's an underscore on YouTube. Lone Star CFB. On Twitter, Lone Star _ CFB, and TikTok. We're popping off over there, so y'all check us out on TikTok as well. So with that being said, make sure you check out the last video that I posted with Jason to have your chance to be entered into the Earl Campbell giveaway.
I'll make sure I get that Earl Campbell, man. My Locked On Longhorns listeners need that Earl Campbell, man.
Yes,
Texas
sir.
needs to get 6-0 on Saturday, Hook.
All right. Well, hey, appreciate y'all rocking with us. Until next time, welcome.
Peace.